Yeah. So you're in Texas right now, right?
I am in Texas,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have about half an inch of ice on the ground, on
Wow.
the streets right now. So I barely made it back I went to the local coffee shop and barely made it back in time. But yeah,
Nice.
no,
Nice.
no.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm just gonna for the recording, I'm just gonna repeat basically what the intent of this series is. And the reason why I
Okay.
picked you, Matthew, like you have such a fascinating story. Not only are you killing it right now in commercial real estate, and I'm curious, tell us a little bit about um, your background. I know we were just talking about Junior World and how we connected in junior golf, but if you can, just start with your background and
Okay.
your transition to kind of where you are today, where you are now.
Well, good questions. When I first started in golf, I was 3 years old, and my dad, said, "Hey," my mom was like, basically, "You gotta get out of the house." And my dad, I got some more time with my dad, and my dad was always golfing and
Yeah.
fishing. Yeah. And so, naturally, I ended up going playing golf with my dad's weekend buddy golfers and slapped some sticks around for a while, and then he realized I liked it, and then cut down clubs, and before I know it, I was playing my first tournament when I was 6 and won that. And then I was playing Junior World, like you mentioned, at 7 years old, and competing in that tournament, and it just kind of, my career, just junior golf, just blossomed, and everything I was doing, from 3 years old and onward, was to be on the PGA Tour, and I hit every kind of mark along the way. Went to the University of Texas, was a 3-time All-American, won the Big 12 championship my senior year. Yeah, I was a Big 12 player, rookie of the year. Played on the Palmer Cup, which is, select few guys get to do that, my junior year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And went on to play professionally. And, and unfortunately, when I came out, right then and there is when we had the financial crisis, or the start of the financial crisis. And what ended up happening is all the mini tours that you typically would start playing on, they all disbanded. And then they kind of came back, and I thought that I had qualified for that US Pro Golf Tour, which was around for a couple of years, and it was actually kind of a good stepping stone to and same competitive level as what we call the Corn Ferry Tour or whatever now, but it was, web.com and Nationwide, and it's been a lot of different names right below the PGA Tour. But that was kind of I was so excited about qualifying for that. And then they played one tournament and it just fell apart because of the financial crisis again. And so all the mini tours were all combined in that one thing. And so all of a sudden there was nowhere to play, and we ended up playing just a few events. And I did the Hooters tour and for 3 years, and tried to qualify for the PGA Tour here locally, and just couldn't make it work. I got the second stage of Q school, and just as far as I could get. And so then I decided to go to Asia, and I was going to go with a friend, and that friend bailed out last minute. So then all of a sudden I was like, I guess I'm going by myself. And what an experience. Ended up qualifying and through the Q school over there, and stayed over there for 3 years playing on the Asian tour, and also qualified for the European tour. So I was playing both those tours for 3 years, and the third year over there, I wasn't playing that well. And so then I had a decision to make. Do I keep trying to play professionally, or do I start a new career? I was 29 years old, and that's kind of when you're like, your prime is in your early 30s, and on the tour for the most part. But way the Q school works, I mean, it takes a couple of years to get on the PGA Tour, because you can only get to the Corn Ferry Tour, and then you have to play out a year out there. So I was like, man, earliest I can be on the tour is 31 years old. What do I do? And man, like you said, tough decision. I went back and forth on it. And ultimately I said, hey, I gave it a good run. And I didn't really leave anything on the table. And so I could look at myself and say, I did do what I wanted to do. And I made a career change. And And how I made that career change was I ended up, because golf gives you a lot of relationships and connections, as you mentioned. And so what I did was I wrote down 3 fields that I thought I could be interested in. And that was oil and gas, anything medical related, and real estate. And I wrote down all the people that I knew, friends, family, people that I ran through my golf, because I always wrote I wrote handwritten letters back to, when I played in pro-ams again with CEOs. And so I just wrote down all the people I knew. And I just called people like we're doing this, podcast right now on Zoom, but I talked to everybody, or I met with them, and I formulated kind of what I thought would be the best path for me, and ultimately decided to start getting my real estate license and become a broker. And then I wasn't sure again where I was what brokerage firm I was going to go to, and I was looking for job interviews. And so I ended up reaching out to the UT Business School. They had just started the real estate program that fall, and I reached out to Rachel Allen, who was the real estate director and for UT, and I said, "Is there any way you can make an exception?" And I gave her my story in terms of being at the McCombs Business School and 3-time American at UT, and she says, "Absolutely." She welcomed me with open arms. And so I ended up going down to, we met for an hour before, but there was these networking panel sessions that were just supposed to be for the undergrads. And at the very first networking panel session, going back into the McCombs Business School, 8 years later, I'm like looking at all these young faces. And actually I was like trying to give myself a pep talk. Don't be intimidated, because I honestly, once you got out of school that long, you don't remember anything anymore. You're back to the basics. And so I'm walking in and go back to this old auditorium that I had classes in, and it seats whatever 150, 200 people, and nobody was sitting in the front. But I was obviously 29, about to be 30. I was ready to get started on my career, so I was sitting in the front row. And the moderator for the panel, asked the panel, what do you look for in your hiring process? And one of the panelists was Bob Young, who is the executive manager director for Weitzman. Pointed right at me and goes, "I'm looking for this guy right here." And he says, "The reason I'm looking for this guy is," he didn't know who I was or anything. He just says, "He's sitting in the front row. Everyone else is 4 rows behind him. And I just know that he is here to get after it. And I need someone, in real estate, you gotta be a go-getter." And so he said, "Come see me afterwards." And so I came and saw him afterwards, and sure enough, it helped that Bob's a good friend, obviously now, but at the time didn't know him from Apple. And so he ended up looking at my resume. It was just golf, 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 because I had nothing else. And that was my only job, was golf, technically. And so he read everything, and he goes, he knows everyone's name, and he is an avid golfer himself. And so he was like, "I know exactly who you are." And so we ended up talking, driving back from Austin back to Dallas. We're driving back that night, and he told me to meet his office at 2:00 the next day, and he hired me on the spot. And wow, that's how I ended up at Weitzman.
Yeah. And now you're the executive vice president of
the DFW brokerage department. Yeah. 8 years later.
That is amazing. So I want to take you back to that class, going back 20, you made that pivot.
Yes.
And you said you were intimidated going back to school because you've been out of school for so long. But what was your mindset? Like you sat in the front row when everybody was in the back, you being intimidated and yet going to the front row, what was your mindset during that time? Like, were you purposely trying to go to the front, or were you, like Bob said, were you really after it? Or was this just kind of your style of going to the front and chasing after it? Or?
Well, I think when I walked in the building, I had that natural reaction of like, do I belong, because everyone was younger, and I felt like I didn't know anything in terms of like finance, accounting anymore, because it was just went right over my head now. But I just kind of, gave myself that little, pep talk, and Bob had me spotted right on. I mean, I was already taking my real estate classes to get my license, and I was a couple classes away and from getting my license, and so Bob had me pegged right. I was already starting the process. I was already committed to doing what I'm doing today,
Yeah.
and so that was my natural reaction, to be in the front row, to I wanted to be up there first, to talk to everyone, give them my resume and make my case. And so, it all worked out in the end, but
Yeah.
a lot of hard work along the way.
Oh, for sure. And the reason why I was kind of picking at that is because, it's ironic, working with a lot of athletes who demonstrate a lot of confidence and, posturing and things like that. Internally, they might not feel confident, but we always say that confidence is the way you dialogue and talk to yourself. And it's the way you move your body and motion. So the motion and your body language and the actions of confidence is a skill that can be developed, even though you might not feel confident. So hearing you say that, I was kind of intimidated. I didn't know if I even belonged. I'm the old fogey in class going back to school, and everybody's so younger, so much younger, and they're in this, and I've been out of it for so long, but yet, like, you gave yourself that pep talk, and you acted like you just kind of fit in. You just went right to the front, and you were after that task of just going after the goal. And look who got hired on the spot. You did. So
yeah,
I mean, that's a beautiful example of confidence as an action. It's a doing skill more than a feeling. Now that might not be the case when you had pivoted. So 29 years old, you went after it ever since you were 3 or 6 years old, started competing. And then, I mean, I know this because I have a very similar story. And at 29 years old, you're sitting here and the financial crisis has happened. You don't think your professional career is going to sustain, but you had to make a pivot and you had no idea what you're going to do. If you were to relive that, like what do you think helped you? Like, what assisted you in making that big of a pivot in your life? Is it the relationships? Is it the skills? What helped you?
well, I mean, some of it was forced. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, um, I was running out of money,
Yeah.
and so that was one of the biggest drivers of my decision. Is I was self-financing
Yeah.
my professional career for 6 years, and as you know, I mean, you're spending, if you're living in your car and you're sharing rooms and expenses and everything you possibly can, you're still spending $70,000-$80,000 a year on your travel expenses. And if you look at the leaders on the Corn Ferry Tour or Asian Tour or any of the others, I mean, the leaders making, or maybe the top 25, to take out the guy that might win 3 events and he was the best player that year. But for everyone else, they're making, like, if you make 100 grand or 150 grand, you're in the top 15 in the money list.
Yeah.
And so everyone's losing money and we're all grinding our butts off. And I didn't have anyone that was willing to back me. And so, and maybe I probably could have, I just didn't ask for other people's money, but,
Yeah.
and that's maybe partly, my fault, but I just wanted to make it on my own. And, ultimately I had no money left. And so I was like, man, I have to make a decision. And in hindsight, maybe I should have chosen brokerage, because it was it wasn't much different from golf, because the first 3 or 4 years in brokerage, it's all commission based. And so you're fighting for every check. It's like making the cut. And so it was, it took a while for it to really pay off, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like a safe salary position that I took.
Yeah.
But I guess that was kind of my inner DNA, wanted me to do this role and strive not to be, tied to a certain salary. I wanted to be able to kind of, march at my own pace, and
For sure.
hopefully sky's the limit in terms of my income potential. So
Yeah. Yeah, and very similar to golf too, what you
Very similar.
produce. Yeah, so I love that. And I'd love to talk in a minute. I'm going to kind of transition to talk about what golf taught you in terms of the skills and the lessons of commercial real estate and what you do now, like the skills that have adapted. But I want I want people to know like how successful you were in junior golf. Like it's crazy. I honestly, when I played with you at Junior World, I think this was back in '96, and I remember my dad always said, Matthew Rosenfeld, he's going to make it. Like you had a game that many people admired, and you even won the U.S. Junior Am, and for people listening, that's a big deal in the junior golf world. Winning the U.S. Junior Am, and especially in the men's, it's a hard feat. It's like, and you did it. And so if you were to go back to your junior golf days in your prime, and a
Yeah.
lot of people kind of listening are junior golfers on this on this podcast as well, but like
Yeah.
what do you think was helpful for you to play at the level that you did? Like in turn, how did you sustain that kind of level of excellence in your junior golf
Yes.
days?
Well, I appreciate all the kind words. Yeah, it was definitely a great run in my junior golf career, and I think I won over 150 different golf tournaments. So it was quite a lot of golf tournaments along the way. But um, what really kind of, I think, always set me apart in my junior golf career was I felt like I always had the best from 100 yards and in. I felt like I was the best player
Yeah.
by far, and I just totally would always. I'd take a shag bag, and that's all I do. I would ship hundreds of balls and different shots, and play. I'd be on the putting green and be playing putting games with guys that were 10 years older than me, and just putting yourself in kind of those situations. That really is kind of what allowed me to be, I think, step up and make the putt when you had to, or make that up and down, or wedge it close. I mean, the game has changed today. I mean, you can see now that those are very important still skills, and it still sets apart the winner from the guy that might just make the cut. But
Yeah.
now today you got to hit it far too,
Yeah.
and so the game has changed in that regard, and technology has been a big part of that too. But and Tiger Woods has been a huge part of that, because everyone now is mindful of their body, and is all in great shape, and everyone's just more fit, they're stronger, they hit it further. And so my ball striking was good, but it wasn't great. But I just sometimes people call me Magic Matt, because I'd be in the bunker, and no way to get in the green. I hit it, 30 yards short of the green, and I take the flag stick out and I chip it in from 30 yards,
I remember that. Yeah.
Awkward, but way of making birdie, but that's how, sometimes I make birdies, and so, that's how I played the game.
Yeah. Now, Matt, how do you think you developed that belief that you were the best 100 yards and in? What cultivated that belief for you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think success breeds more confidence, and then you keep layering that over and over and over again, and you build up kind of that shield of confidence that hopefully no one can break. But the game is very, very fickle though too, and you could. I mean, I remember my senior year in college, and this is not on the short game side of things, but I remember, I couldn't. I'd be on the tee box, and it could have went 30 yards left of the fairway or 30 yards right of the fairway. But I realized though too, I could still have good hands. It's just trying to hit it straight. I couldn't hit it straight. But if I got up in the tee box and you told me to hit a 30-yard slice or a 30-yard hook in the fairway, I could do it. but and I lost total confidence, and I thought it was my confidence. Well, it really wasn't my confidence. It was a technique flaw that I had developed. And when you're underneath the plane hitting flip hooks or blocking it dead right, there's nothing you can have the best hands in the world, and you're still gonna, under pressure, it's not gonna work.
Mhm.
And so that was very difficult to then, I had to spend months on changing my technique to then rebuild the confidence. And you don't rebuild the confidence until, I relate it to one of my favorite movies, Days of Thunder. I don't know if you've seen the Tom Cruise Days of Thunder movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of like almost like a Top Gun movie in a way. Same kind of music and director, but he's in Daytona, and he had the most confidence in the world. And then he got into a wreck that wasn't really his fault, and he lost total confidence.
Mm.
And he did not get that confidence back until at the end of the movie. A similar wreck happened, and he had to go through the smoke, and couldn't see where the track was, and if he was going to hit another car similar to the first accident. And he made it through the cloud of smoke, and he turns to, it was Robert Duvall, who's his pit crew, and he goes, Harry, I'm through it, I'm out of it. And he had that breakthrough moment where he got through the trauma of the accident. And that's kind of how golf is too. Like, and when you start losing your confidence in something, you don't get your confidence back until you get back in that situation in a tournament with the tournament on the line. And I'm not just in a tournament where you got to make a cut. I'm talking about you're playing the final hole Sunday, got to make par, got to hit the fairway so you can win the golf tournament. Until you hit that drive that you hit the fairway, you're still going to have those demons in the back of your head. And so, and that's why a lot of times you see like PGA guys, like even like Jordan Spieth, fantastic player. He had he went through some issues, and you notice last year he finally had his breakthrough, back and winning. But before that, I mean, you can look, there's probably 6 or 7 tournaments where he made it all the way to Sunday, and he just couldn't quite pull it off. But he kept knocking at the door, and he kept getting a little bit of that confidence back to where he finally broke through, and now he's playing good golf again. So that's I mean, that movie I just relate to quite a bit, that Days of Thunder movie.
Yeah. I love that analogy, the Days of Thunder and going through the fog. How do you fight off those demons and putting yourself back in those situations? And when you had lost your confidence in you're dealing with your own fog, and you're in the final lap or final hole, and like, how, looking back, how did you deal with some of those demons that keep trying to creep up and knock at your confidence?
I think there's really no good way of doing it other than what I said, is like, you just have to keep, you have to have the fortitude to, basically persevere through those situations. And so, eventually, hopefully you hit so many, like in golf or whatever, you hit so many balls that you may still have that nervousness when you make that swing, but you're hoping, for that moment to where your body mechanics and everything, no matter what, you trust it, and you rip it. And then you have that aha moment where like, wow, like, okay, I've got it now. And then there's no looking back again. And so, and that's kind of, I use those same things in life today and in real estate today. I mean, there's times where you're sailing along and a deal, and then you come across a stumbling block, and then you lose a deal, and you're like, what did I do wrong? And a lot of times it may have nothing to do with you whatsoever. There's 99 ways to lose a deal, and you might only control one of them, but you still got to get back out there and work on the next deal and start over again. And it's the same thing in golf. So
Yeah. Fortitude was the word. I think that's such a powerful word, especially in days like today. So many challenges, right? And it's like we're constantly buried with a lot of different, like the news, and fortitude is such a strong word for me. I don't know. When you said that, it just resonated with me. If I mean, if you feel comfortable with this question, and please push back, but what's the biggest obstacle you had faced, and how did you, if you did overcome it, how did you overcome it?
Like in golf or in real
Just
estate?
in both, just looking back on your life, like what was one of the biggest challenges or obstacles you had to overcome?
Ah, man, real estate, I would say, um, it's just getting started really in real estate. And so, you're commission based only. I tell you, I was down to, I had zero net worth basically. I had $4,000 in my checking account, and I had $4,000 in credit card bills I needed to pay.
Yeah.
And I've been working on this deal for 7, 8 months, and I learned the hard lessons that real estate deals take longer to, you think you're going to get done in January, for example, and it won't get done until August or, or longer. And so I was, eating ramen noodles and wondering how I was going to pay rent and all those things. Um, and so I got down, and I'm driving down to Austin, to have a little weekend with my friends. And I'm in the car driving, and my client calls me and goes, Matt, this deal's dead. And I was like, that means my real estate career was dead. And I was like, no, what do you mean? Like, his partners couldn't come together with couldn't get together on the partnership agreement, even though the lease was signed. So I immediately turned back my car around. I was halfway down to Austin and Waco, and I turned back around Dallas and said, we're meeting, we need to have all partners meeting in your office tomorrow at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. And sure enough, we did. And I was just there basically kind of as almost a marriage counselor in a way, and trying to get everyone, together on the same page. And luckily I was able to do that. And we ended up signing they agreed on the partnership structure and got the lease signed. And that fee was the reason why was able to stay in real estate. So
Wow.
that's how close I was not to make it in real estate. So,
Wow.
yeah.
The do whatever it takes mentality, like even on a Sunday, kind of gathering that meeting and calling the shots. Wow.
Yeah. And again, I was 30 years old, right? And I'm having a business meeting with four other guys, that are doctors that are in their 50s, and I'm trying to convince them to do this deal, and still had very novice experience in real estate. So it was, but I'm glad I was able to make sense out of everything, out of it all, and was able to make that deal. So.
Yeah. I'm sure in hindsight, like you being this 30-year-old dude, and you're dealing with doctors who are in their 50s, who are, professionals, whatnot, but you were so hungry, and it was like life or death for you. So you had to respond,
Yep.
and step up to the plate. And you probably had, everything was on the line essentially for you. But looking back on it, like what worked? Like, how were you able to convince those 50-year-olds to do a meeting on Sunday at 8 a.m.?
I honestly, I really don't know. It was just like you said, it was life or death. So I was pulling every trick out of the bag to at the time to make that thing happen. And, I just, was just able to get it done. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. It's just, you just gotta, if one thing doesn't work, you try a different angle, and you try another different angle, and you try another angle until you do make it work. But I always find though in life, and especially in real estate, that it's a lot easier to, in an email, even to say no. It's a little bit harder to say no over the phone. But when you're in person and you're looking someone eye to eye, there's that other level of connection, and everyone has a human factor.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get everyone calmed down face to face, I find that's the way to truly get over conflict.
Mm.
And that's true for your personal life too.
Yeah.
Because no one really wants to. Most people don't want to be in conflict,
Yeah.
and it's just easier to kind of stay silent and not speak up.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to kind of get together and talk it through.
You know what, I'm noticing a theme about you that I'm picking up, and it's something that you do very naturally, but it's very effective. Before, you were talking about, like, even when you're playing as a pro, you're writing handwritten letters, and you had a list of all your contacts, and you're reaching out to them, not by email, but really connecting with them. So there's this connection where either you hop on Zoom or you meet them in person. It's this relationship based networking, but it's not just hiding behind emails or even a phone call. It's more that connection, that face to face. And I think those are relationships that you cultivated really helped you to figure out, okay, meeting with them and cultivating this relationship, you can get a lot of ground, you can get a lot of movement going. So yeah, that's incredible, you know.
I,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I just got lucky, or I think maybe it really goes back though to growing up in the in the golf world. I mean, I give a lot of credit to that. When you're when you're a junior golfer, you're on the range and you're 8 years old. I mean, you're at a country club and you got all these, you don't know it at the time, you're not really thinking about it, but they're all these CEOs of all these other companies, or they're in high level positions, but everyone out there is older than you, right? Except for the few other kids that you're playing with. And so it's always yes, sir. It's yes, ma'am. You're always respectful of who you're talking to. And I think it teaches you a level of maturity.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to have these relationships, not be timid, and talking to your elders. And I still, our chairman of our company, is 82 years old, and I actually say 82 years young. I mean, he out hustles 23-year-old still,
Yeah,
and
sure.
but you have to be able to relate, and I think that's partly why I was promoted last year into my role and leading the entire brokerage department, is because I'm kind of that perfect gap between talking to someone that's older than me, but also talking to the college grads and the millennials. And so I can relate to both sides of the coin and bridge any problems that arise, and help educate and grow some of these young real estate brokers' careers.
Yeah. What else did golf teach you about business, or what you're doing right now, or even life?
Trying to think. I mean, I wrote that one article on why, what helped translate, what golf taught me to translate into real estate, and didn't even know that was going to be published. When I wrote it, I mean, I was just, I might have added some more, commentary or proofread a little bit more, but they straight out published it, and I was like, it was kind of cool that my first article, and probably my last, that I actually published myself. But I wrote down like 6 things that I thought golf taught me to make me successful in real estate, and one of those things was passion. I mean, you got to be passionate. Whatever field you choose, you got to have that passion.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just becomes just work, and when it's just work, then it's no fun to go to. It's just a drag every day, and you show up with a poor attitude, and then it just gets worse through the day, and you never seem to get out of that funk. And so if you're not passionate what you're doing, then then you need to reevaluate what you are doing. And so that's one. Work ethic goes along with passion. So you got to have that persistence, work ethic, fortitude, which we talked about. Because if you don't have those things, then I don't care what you're doing, you're not going to be successful. I mean, I don't know anyone that doesn't work hard. Maybe when you're in the back end of your career, maybe there's less work, but even then, I think everyone works very, very hard to be successful to where they get to. And then relationships. That's no matter whatever you're doing in life, it's you have to cultivate relationships and maintain those relationships. And you reached out to me on LinkedIn, and here we are. I remember your name from junior golf. I'm playing with you, and so relationships can last forever. And so that's important. I think I mentioned a couple others. Teamwork is really important. No matter, you think golf, everyone very individual sport, right? But it is, but it isn't. You have your psychologist, that's on your team. You have your chiropractor that's on your team. You have your trainer that's on your team. You have your swing coach that's on your team. Your friends are on your team. Your parents are on your team. Everyone is there to help support you. And so it's individual, but it's also not. I mean, there's competitors that, I say cooperation is you're competing, but you're also cooperating with one another. And so, there's even though it's individual, and brokerage is also very individual, like golf, but I work on deals on both sides, seller and buyers, brokers, or tenant rep broker and landlord broker, or working on a team within my own shop. I mean, we're both, making sure that this deal gets done. And so there's still an element of teamwork, even though it might be still independent based.
I love that. So relationship based, teamwork, putting in hard work, the training aspect, the passion. I remember reading that article. I was like, wow, like that's what kicked off this series. Honestly, Matt, when I read that article, it's like, what golf taught me about commercial real estate. It was that title. And I was like, man, that is brilliant. And you might have just kind of blogged it and just wrote some notes down and things like that, but it's very insightful. The reflections of what golf really taught you and how you bridge those talents over to commercial real estate and doing what you're doing. I think there's so much fruit from golf. And we need to kind of pause and reflect on what golf really teaches us. And I think there's so much, even going back to when you're 8 years old and kind of playing with these members who are in their 50s and learning how to relate with them. It gives you a sense of maturity, and it's kind of helps you bridge that gap and be in that role that you're, working with the generation above and the generation below. So, it's beautiful.
Golf is such a great game. It's just and the people that are listening, if golf is your passion and career and you make it, go for it, go take it all the way to where you can take it to. But golf again will open up so many doors for you, and the skills and life lessons you learn from golf will translate for the rest of your life. And we're just so blessed, that both of us got to grow up and learn those life lessons from golf as a kid.
So, just curious, one final question for the competitive golfers out there. You competed at the highest level, and just taking yourself back into that competitive golfing mentality in the life. What advice would you give yourself or give others who are in that state of competing in golf? Like what advice would you give if you were to look back?
Well, I think I touched on, one of the things that was successful is my short game. But I tell you what, why I was really successful on the short game side, and you're kind of going down that path, and I should have just kept going with it. But, I always felt like I just had that mental edge, and you've gotta, it's that inner belief that you have to give yourself, and that if you're mentally strong enough, and you convince yourself, I mean, mental strength is something that you can teach yourself.
Mhm.
And if you can work on it constantly. But if you have the right mindset, a lot of good things end up happening, for you in golf. And that's where that's where you're always striving to get to. And to build that mental confidence, you have to, sometimes you have to, perfect or get close enough to perfecting the technique. But, in golf, it's a fine line. There's so many outside forces that can tell you things to do. But then you have to also learn to narrow those voices, and I don't want to say tune out, but you have to pick what works for you, and not everything works. Something can work for one person, and it might not work for the other. And so you have to be receptive to advice, but you also have to know which advice to take. And it's a very, very fine line. And because you can't have too many, you got to have that mental strength, and you can't have too many clutters in your head while you're playing golf, or you're not going to have success.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's so much noise these days. So being able to tune out a lot of it and pick the one that really works for you is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah.
Yes. That's right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Final question, Matt. So what would be the ideal client right now? Like, in your role, what you do? I know you're servicing people in Texas. Is it Dallas specifically?
So I'm Dallas Fort Worth based.
Okay.
So a little bit about Weitzman. Weitzman's a 32-year-old company. Our chairman and founder of our company is Herb Weitzman. We're a vertically integrated company, so we have offices in the major cities in Texas. So San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Dallas Fort Worth. And what we do is we're full service. So we do asset management, property management. We develop shopping centers. We also do all the different brokerage levels. So we primarily focus on retail, but we can sell a property. We can represent a buyer and buying a property. We can represent a landlord and leasing the property. We can represent a tenant going into the property. And there's other transactions too that we can do, but we handle it all. And then my side is I typically do more investment sales.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but if it's another need, then I coordinate it within our 32 brokers that we have in our DFW office, and make sure it goes to the right person that has the best expertise to handle that situation.
I love it. Oh, man, it's good stuff. It's exciting because the time that we're in too. Everyone's going to Texas. Everyone seems to be going to Texas. So you picked a good spot. Yeah.
We are very lucky to be in Texas in commercial real estate. We had 57,000 housing starts in DFW last year.
That is amazing.
Alone. That's a record. Wow. When I first started the company just 9 years ago, we were at 6 million people. We're at 8 million people.
What?
So we just think about it. We've took what we had and grew 33% in less than a decade.
Wow.
We're going to be at 10.5 million people in 10 years, at this rate. And so that just creates more and more opportunities to develop and buy and sell real estate in DFWs. Yeah.
What do you think it is about Texas? I mean, state taxes, all that stuff, but what is it so attractive right now, you think?
Well, I mean, COVID has definitely excelled things. But so what's happening is not to get too political, but what's happening is that a lot of people are fleeing California, New York, and other states and coming to Texas.
Yeah.
You mentioned, we're kind of in the middle of the road on a tax rate. We don't have state income taxes, but we do. Our property taxes are actually very high.
Pretty high, yeah.
High, yeah. So we're not as, I mean, we're not as like as good as you think in terms of our tax level. It's pretty good though, but we're very, very pro growth, and we have a lot of people that from top to bottom that are helping that initiative, and that's what, and we're lucky to be in the central part of the country.
Yeah.
The biggest thing why Dallas and Fort Worth is successful is when they opened DFW International Airport, and it's dead smack in between Dallas and Fort Worth. I was talking to the Dallas Fort Worth airport people the other day. Didn't realize this, but DFW Airport is larger than Manhattan.
Wow.
And it's the second or third largest airport in the world. Wow. There's one, the Iraq base a military base was like number one, I think, and Denver's International Airport is number two. And then Dallas is three, but we're, Denver's outside the city. This is right in the middle of DFW. And so we're not bound by any barriers, but we don't have a port either, but DFW becomes our port for freight.
Yeah.
And so everyone just flies in the middle of the country, and they have to basically fly through DFW.
Yeah.
And that's why we're lucky. I mean, if you think about going north, you got Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. You don't have like a major city in the States unless you go up to Chicago. So Dallas and Chicago are really the two hubs in the middle of the country in terms of airports.
So for those who are listening, if you're interested in commercial real estate, contact Matthew Rosenfeld at Weitzman.
That's right.
Please, yeah, because he'll take care of you for sure. Matt, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate this, and it was great to reconnect with you, and hope we can continue and foster the relationship for sure. But I appreciate you.
I appreciate the invite, Dr. Park, and good to see you again, man.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, we'll connect again.
All right. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.